It's no secret that the United States has a long and complicated history regarding international conflict and intervention, whether overt or covert. From clandestine operations in the global south meant to destabilize sovereign nations that sought to protect or nationalize commodities like oil or water, to setting up puppet regimes and arming insurrectionist movements in the Middle East, the US has been a routine and stalwart participant in global conflict. But the machinations of this involvement are often obfuscated from the direct experience of the average American, who is most frequently concerned with their direct experiences in relation to the national economic status quo. The specter of war is often used to galvanize the public into voting for politicians with increasingly hawkish offensive and defensive military positions, with little acknowledgement of the geographic isolation of the USA, making it difficult for some and functionally impossible for many opposition governments to materialize an attack on US soil. This is extended by the sheer might of the US military, with around 750 military bases positioned throughout 80 countries, spending more on the military than the next 9 countries combined. Military might is one of the primary focal points of national politicians in Washington, D.C. Despite this, most, if not all, development of weaponry is done in large part by private corporations. Many of these corporations have manufacturing operations throughout the states and rely heavily, if not entirely, on government subsidy or contracts to maintain business. These companies provide jobs for working-class Americans who would then go on to vote or not in local, state, and national elections. These workers are relatively beholden to their job. To lose it would create economic instability for them as individuals. Then there's the second head of the beast, the role of the politician, who maintains the contracts of the manufacturers on the grounds of defending jobs created by the manufacturers, and thus will advocate for continued defense spending for military growth on private defense contractors. When laid out in this manner, it highlights the truth that despite the seemingly distant and dissociated relationship between global conflicts and local issues, they are inextricably connected, but often shrouded in at best opaque and worst non-existent examination by local and national media. It's very easy for a US voter to take a moral position of being anti-war or anti-interventionist without having to reconcile any kind of material relationship to the contribution they may be making to uphold a distinctly different status quo. This is the often undiscussed border between local issues and international outcomes, and the state of New Hampshire provides a very clean and stark example of this dynamic. It's important to provide some context regarding the diversity of the arms industry in the state of New Hampshire. To do so requires a bit of elucidation on a sample of the corporations operating within the state and the economic valuation, as well as the commodity impact of those corporations. While known for our firearms manufacturers, we would be remiss to not begin with indicating one of the most deadly industries operating in New Hampshire. BAE Systems, a multinational defense contractor which receives the lion's share of contracts awarded by DoD and DHS, employs roughly 6,500 workers in New Hampshire, spread out over multiple campuses in 4 separate cities. They are responsible for the production of advanced military weapon applications, including electromagnetic jamming, monolithic microwave integrated circuit or MMIC, and laser guidance for missiles, APKWS. From their website, combat proven for over a decade, BAE Systems APKWS laser guidance kit redefines precision munitions by hitting targets with pinpoint accuracy and minimal collateral damage, delivering critical lethality when it matters most. BAE ranks 4th in companies by employment in the state, beating out healthcare providers such as Dartmouth-Hitchcock. In 2023, BAE Systems' annual report boasted 25.283 billion British pounds in sales, roughly 34.476 billion in US dollars, with the US representing 42%, UK at 26%, and Saudi Arabia at 11% respectively of those sales. BAE manufactures electronic missile launching kits and other components for use in F-15, F-16, and F-35 fighter jets, all used by the Israeli Air Force throughout their ongoing offensive attacks on Gaza. BAE is also responsible for the manufacture of 155mm howitzer rounds, also extensively used in Gaza. Formed through the merger of L3 Technologies and Harris Communications in 2019, L3Harris is the 12th largest weapons manufacturer in the world. The Londonderry location is responsible for the production of situational awareness technology for operators in low-light situations, as well as RF and telemetry for airborne weapon systems. Components manufactured by L3Harris are integral in the construction of JDAM guidance kits, or Joint Direct Attack Munitions, a product manufactured by Boeing. JDAM are used to convert unguided bombs into guided munitions. Again, used by Israel in their continued siege in Gaza. Regarding Operator Enhanced Night Vision Goggle Binocular, or ENVGB, US Senator Jeanne Shaheen said following the attainment of a contract awarded to L3Harris, quote, "The defense industrial base in New Hampshire contributes immensely to our national security, and this new investment in L3Harris ENVGB program will continue to fuel production of cutting-edge night vision capability for the warfighter in Londonderry. I'm proud of the L3Harris workforce here in New Hampshire and the important work they are doing to enhance our national defense." The contract was valued at $263 million. Originally a Swiss wagon manufacturer, Speerwieswagenfabrik, which pivoted to rifle manufacturing in the early 1860s with the Prelatsbaron rifle, began to build pistols for the Swiss army and changed its name to Speerwies Industriegesellschaft. The handguns were developed by SIG and produced by German manufacturer SIG Sauer and Son, which was later acquired by SIG, establishing the German company SIG Sauer GmbH. In 1985, a subsidiary, SIG Arms Inc., was established in Virginia. After operating out of two separate manufacturing locations, in 1990, SIG Arms Inc. relocated to Exeter, New Hampshire. In 2004, in the face of a potential company collapse, CEO Ron Cohen decided to pivot to manufacturing AR-15 style rifles, which saw the company grow from 130 employees to over 1,000 and was producing over 43,000 firearms a year. During the 2010s, CEO Ron Cohen became embroiled in a German court case accusing the New Hampshire location of functionally laundering pistols in contravention of German law to supply Columbia National Police with said pistols. Ron Cohen would end up being convicted and fined $675,000 with a suspended sentence of 18 months, serving no time behind bars. In 2017, SIG Sauer was awarded a contract by the U.S. military to produce the replacement for the Beretta M9. In 2022, they were additionally awarded the contract to replace the M4A1 carbine rifle used by the U.S. military with the XM5 and the M249 squad automatic weapon with the X250 through a 10-year firm fixed price follow-on production, with the initial delivery order valued at $20.4 million. By searching the job postings for the above companies, it's revealed, at least at the time of this video, that SIG Sauer wages hover around $21 per hour. L3Harris employees receive between $45,000 to $75,000 annually, and BAE Systems with a similar rate as L3Harris, with production and assembly jobs earning between $46,000 and $80,000 annually. It's also worth mentioning that management and engineering positions at BAE are often valued significantly higher, ranging from as low as $72,000 annually to the upper end at $220,000 annually. Searching for what constitutes comfortable living in the US will show that an individual earner would need to make between $75,000 to $100,000 annually on average. It could be argued that these numbers are meant to describe living in US cities. However, increasing property tax rates as well as inflating rent, transportation, and food costs in rural New Hampshire likely provide an offset. The average rental cost in New Hampshire is currently $1,800 a month, meaning someone earning $80,000 annually would be paying around 27% of their income on rental costs. This is very close to the 30% rule for the highest of blue-collar positions at these companies, and exceeds it for the production-level positions at these companies. While these jobs may indeed bring a much better income for workers than service industry jobs, they still do not match the rising economic demands placed on residents. But for an average blue-collar worker who's familiar with the impacts of austerity, they are still able to keep the lights on and stay off the street. According to Synetia's The Economic Impact of the Defense Cluster in New England, quote, "The defense cluster in New Hampshire has economic linkages with other sectors in the state. In New Hampshire, every 100 direct jobs created in the private defense industry supports another 72 jobs via the multiplier effect. In 2022, the defense cluster's total economic impact in New Hampshire includes a total of 47,392 jobs, which represents 6.9% of the state's employment. Of these, 28,428 are direct jobs, and 18,964 are indirect or induced jobs." The report goes on to state, quote, "The generation of $4.3 billion in income for households, including $4 billion from the private defense industry and $0.3 billion from the military defense infrastructure. The defense cluster supported 8.6% of the total income generated in the state. Additionally, quote, the generation of $12.5 billion in economic output, the state's GDP, including $10.5 billion from the private defense industry and $2.1 billion from the military defense infrastructure. The defense cluster contributed to 12% of the total output produced in the state." The report itself is much wider in scope than simply looking at direct employment opportunities provided by BAE, L3Harris, and SIG Sauer respectively, likely including specific DoD jobs and contractors. However, they caveat that, quote, no indirect effect is generated by military employment when referring to induced jobs. An important takeaway here is that while the defense cluster in New Hampshire is responsible for a consequential amount of revenue that comes to the state, workers themselves on an individual basis are not broadly experiencing an economic buoy from that revenue, and are, in most cases, still struggling to make ends meet. It does, however, create a sense of protectionism for the jobs on an individual level, and a protection of the broader industry on a political level. Jeanne Shaheen, a former governor of New Hampshire, has had a 16-year-long career as a US Senator following her time as governor. Of her committee assignments, some of the most notable are foreign relations, appropriations, and armed services, which place her at a nexus that has an immense power over the US role in international conflict. Shaheen has a history of voting in favor of National Defense Authorization Acts dating back as far as 2009. These annual bills allocate billions of dollars to supporting military budgets that steadily increase the national spending that directly supports U.S. military operations around the globe. Maggie Hassan, 2nd Senator from New Hampshire, also a former governor, has too consistently voted in favor of the National Defense Authorization Acts, touting taking on China as well as delivering for the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. Supporting these bills can be used as a talking point related to the support of defense contracts awarded to New Hampshire-based weapons manufacturers. But rarely does ownership of responsibility regarding what happens with those weapons after the sales materialize. From the perspective of Congress, allocation of funds does not correlate to endorsement of what is done with the commodities purchased with those funds, despite the reality that the allocation itself is a tacit endorsement of the subsequent actions. Shaheen voted in favor of the Border Act of 2024, which would have expanded DHS authority over border control and reinstated funds for Trump-era border wall construction. While this has less to do with weapons sales or defense spending, it elucidates a tendency for a union of perspective across the aisle in U.S. politics when regarding security at home or abroad, even if there is disagreement on exactly which road to take to get there. It's worth stating that Hassan also voted in support of this bill. For both Shaheen and Hassan, it's easy to shroud any of the less savory outcomes regarding exactly how dollars and commodities are utilized behind an economic argument that it provides more jobs and money to their home state by way of defense spending allocations. By emphasizing the latter without addressing the former, both Shaheen and Hassan have capitalized on a voter base in New Hampshire that will often vote Republican locally and Democrat nationally. Gerrymandering might have something to do with that too. But in this particular instance, there's hardly any daylight between the parties, excluding outlier examples such as Senator Sanders or Senator Markey, when the effort to fund the national security and defense apparatus is bipartisan. It's low-hanging fruit that won't incur any blowback when bloated budgets for defense spending are essentially a foregone conclusion in the US, and economic issues sit at the top of voters' priority lists. This implies that support for defense spending is an incredibly safe bet politically in the state of New Hampshire, regardless of party, even if voters would prefer lower taxes and/or less international conflict. Whether you're on the left or the right, New Hampshire is known for its strong libertarian political lean and cultural affinity for guns. Positions that, despite ideological divergence, tend to transcend party lines. The result is a strange political and economic quagmire at the intersection of these conflicting beliefs. Maybe it's the cognitive dissonance of libertarian impulses to disengage from intervention, juxtaposed with free market ideology often held by state politicians and business owners. A readiness to offer weapons to anyone with the money to purchase them. It's a deeply capitalist position, but what does that mean for the Granite Staters living on the edge of economic precarity within that system? Politicians will manufacture consent for this narrative. It's great for jobs in New Hampshire, and we won't talk about whether or not it's bad for anyone outside the borders of our state or country. But it doesn't change reality. In this instance, global conflict is a local issue. There's no easy answer when a significant portion of the state economy is tied to prioritizing militarization over social and economic safety nets. Sure, we could reduce the defense budget to improve social programs, but that could mean workers lose their jobs if the factories downsize or close. It's played as an unfortunate catch-22 that encourages residents to not interrogate this issue any further. In a state where the motto is live free or die, do we only believe this to be true for ourselves, or is it a value held beyond the borders of our state? It's also worth noting that New Hampshire residents and voters are far from monolithic, and there are many who will confidently denounce these positions. Realistically, this topic will remain obscure to both state and national politics for both voters and politicians alike, but that does not, by any means, make it any less deserving of scrutiny.